Hi YouTube and welcome to Danielle's Denture Diaries. I am Danielle. In this video I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I've never done a story time video before, and I know I've dropped tidbits of information along the way as I've uploaded videos here to the support group. So for me personally, I've just always been a very curious person, where once I start listening to or become invested in someone else, another content creator, I always just genuinely get curious as to where they came from, why they are the way they are, and my mind kind of tends to take on its own kind of story plot line. So I thought I would do that. I always liked watching those videos. If this isn't the kind of content you're here for, I absolutely understand. I just thought I would do something different. So through the story, I will not be naming specific places or names, not only for my own privacy, but also for the safety of others. So the safety and privacy of others. So without further ado, let's go ahead and just get into it. I was born to a woman who was in an abusive marriage before she found my dad again. I guess they had known each other since like high school. They lived next door. My mom was a popular cheerleader, and my dad was a fairly successful athlete, also popular. I don't know how much of their stories that they would tell me was embellished, but, it is what it is. I think they just wanted to sound more like a fairy tale. And anyway, so my dad had actually left the state. He joined the Navy. He moved to another state and kind of fell off the radar. My mom had been in the abusive marriage and had my older brother, and basically found my dad and moved to the state where he was and took my brother along. It wasn't very long before my parents were married. Then they had me pretty quick. And again, I'm not complaining. From my understanding, their marriage was very rocky from the start. Could be that they moved too fast. Maybe they didn't have certain conversations that they should have. At least that's definitely my understanding looking back as an adult now, is they were not on the same page for certain things. And anyways, they were together for a very, very long time. And throughout my childhood, some of my earliest days that I can remember is there was hostility and tension in the house pretty much all the time. My parents were not the best at resolving conflict in a very healthy way, and I think a lot of it played a part that they didn't have certain conversations they should have, like aligning on how are we going to have kids, how are we going to raise them, how are we going to discipline them, what kind of schools do we want them to go to, what kind of values do we want in the house, what kind of religion do we want to be observed, and how. And it definitely didn't help that my dad was gone a lot. So my mom had to do a lot for herself and figure out things for herself. And when my dad would be home, again, things were pretty intense and pretty aggressive. So I pretty much grew up with anxiety. I tended to always have this kind of like gut clench when I would hear the garage door opening to our house, or if my mom was calling the house to tell me my dad was coming home, I would immediately feel like I was going to throw up, and I would run around the house cleaning and all kinds of stuff, and it was just very intense. And then to top that off, I mean, even before that, I was being bullied at school. I would say elementary school like the last few years of elementary school was when my medical condition, being born without enamel, became prominent. Was that my teeth started to break and fall apart, and they weren't growing quite the way they should have been. And I started being called Shark Girl. And at first it didn't mean much to me because I didn't know what normal meant or what it was. I didn't have a very good understanding of, okay, so I'm Shark Girl, what does that make you? Like, and I would just kind of come up with my own name right back. And it wasn't until about middle school that reality really did kind of set in for me, was that I was just not normal. And that was when my reconstructional processes began. I went to one dentist for a very long time. I want to say it was Dr. It wasn't Seltzer, but it was something like that. I don't remember. Shepherd's? I don't remember, but he was a very well-known children's pediatric dentist in the area. And it got to a point where he sat back, he did an exam for me, and he looked at my mom and said, there's nothing else I can do at this point. I'm not specialized enough, and I'm not qualified in this area. I do have a person in mind, and I'll send you a referral. So we went and we found the dentist that I would have for pretty much the rest of my childhood and young adulthood. And he was great. He put the caps on my teeth that I needed. He saw me pretty often. And as I was going through this, the violence in the home only got worse. And it went from being between my parents to spilling over to the children, even us kids. And at some point, I took it upon myself to be a protector. And all of a sudden, once I hit end of middle school into high school, something flipped where my little sister was being bullied. She was adopted. She's actually a cousin of mine, but we adopted her due to some family issues. I found out she was being bullied at the bus stop, so I actually walked her to the bus stop, and I scared the kid that was teasing her. I got involved because I saw she had put her hair up, and she was very proud when she would do her hair or her makeup. She was a very beautiful girl. She was very proud of how she'd look. And to see him touching her hair and undo the clip sent me over, and I couldn't take it anymore. After already hearing her feel so insecure, I went over and I handled it. And then my little brother also, he had gotten punched in the face on the bus. And I got home before they did. So I would be able to get them to the bus stop, walk them away. I don't remember exactly, but anyways, I went to the bus stop to pick up my brother, and his lip was busted. And I asked, who did this to you? And kids were still coming off the bus, so the bus doors were still open. And when he wouldn't answer me, there were a couple kids that leaned out of the window saying, he did it, and they were pointing at someone on the bus. So while the doors were still open, I ran onto the bus, and the bus driver kept yelling at me, get off the bus, I'll call the police. And I had my skateboard with me, and the kids were still pointing, this one, it was him. So I walked over and I took my skateboard and I put it in his face, and I said, you ever touch my little brother again, I will get back on this bus and I will find you. I was a kid myself, but no one ever touched my little brother again. So I don't know. I became a protector, and there was only one person that I couldn't protect anyone from, and that was my dad. Um, he knew how to scare people. He knew how to be intimidating. And going through high school, I originally went to a college prep high school, and it was the most proud I think I'd ever made my dad was getting a letter of acceptance to this college prep. And for me, I had already accumulated now anxiety, also some depression. I had gotten pretty insecure, and I was definitely drinking way too much caffeine than I should have been. Probably didn't really touch water at all, I don't think. And the idea of going to a more intense school just scared me more than anything. And being that my mom would always color my hair blonde, I would always get called a dumb blonde sometimes. And part of that played in with my teeth already making me abnormal. So I just acted less normal. I was a clown. I would make random noises to make my friends laugh. And at one point, my own best friend at the time had turned around on me one time. I had embarrassed her in front of her popular friends, and she said, "Why do you act like this? Why are you so embarrassing?" And I walked away, and I cried when I got home, but I went back the next day and I ignored her, and she finally asked me, "Why are you ignoring me?" And I told her, "Because I'll just embarrass you. Go back to your popular friends. You don't need me anymore." And she apologized, but things were never the same since then. And this was a friend who I had told her some of the things that were happening in my house. I had been abused a few times in a few different ways. And she knew about it. And for her to still call me embarrassing was just a lot for me. So, handled it. It is what it is. So, I kind of started to think maybe going to a college prep high school would be a new start and a new beginning with a new reputation and a new version of myself. Things got so much worse. I was called a dumb blonde by a teacher, which was new. That had never happened before. And when I told my mom, she asked for a parent-teacher conference, and the teacher blatantly lied and said, "I would never. Your daughter is one of the smartest kids in the class, and she asks such great questions," which is interesting because it was when I was trying to ask a question that she said, "What do you need now, Blondie?" So, that happened. And then my skin started to act up. So I'm already going through the dental stuff. My parents had freaked out. Well, my dad freaked out when he realized that I was basically blind and I needed contacts or glasses. And up to this point, my biggest saving grace was that I was AB honor roll and I was a cheerleader. So, had that. And I did gymnastics, so I could do like back tucks, back handsprings. I was never the best dancer, but I could do tumbling like no other. And to this day, I still kind of can. But my skin started acting up, And what really changed from there was a whole new level of insecurity. And my mom tried taking me to a dermatologist one time. I didn't get any answers that I needed. I didn't get a treatment plan for the long term. I didn't get a diagnosis, nothing. In fact, rather than talking about my dry skin, my mom brought up my acne. So I don't know what happened in that translation there, but the acne wasn't the part that was upsetting me. It was the dry skin. Acne happens, and I knew that, but it was the dry skin that I couldn't get around. So, when that happened, and at some point, my parents got into an argument over me. They had gotten into many arguments. It wasn't abnormal with each other, sometimes over my oldest brother, sometimes over my little sister, and it was always something. But this time it was about me. And my dad had said something about, it's no wonder why she has so many issues, and blame my mom. And I yelled at him, and my mom tried shoving me into my room and shut the door behind me, or tried to, but before she could even do that, he was right there, and yeah. But that flipped yet another switch, that it would never matter who it was. I stand pretty steadfast in what I believe, and I'll stand up to any bully. That just became one of my new defining features, is that I don't tolerate bullies. I don't tolerate bullying. And regardless of my health issues, some of it could have been my mom's doing by either not helping me take care of it as my parent, or, allowing our nutrition to be a certain way, whatever the case. But for him to make that accusation and not say, hey, for her sake, let's come together and figure this out. Let's schedule the doctor's appointments. Let's go to whatever. Like, let's just help her. Instead, he was just set on pointing the finger. And I think that's what really set me off looking back. Especially because I did eventually learn that my mom was also struggling with depression. When she lost her dad, my grandpa, she was never really the same. And I can relate to this day, and I'll tell you why later. So once that had happened, my dad left, and my mom was talking to me and asking me, why would I do that? Why would I say that? Why would I, whatever. And I told her, because it wasn't fair. The way he was, the way he acted, it wasn't fair. And I couldn't take it anymore, and it made her cry. And he of course came back, and the abuse still only got worse. Was my mom always innocent? No, not by any means. But I definitely think a lot of the issues stemmed from her not being allowed to speak. So my dad would lash out, she would lash out back, and it was just a very troublesome household. So I basically get kicked out of or pulled out of the college prep high school, and I went to a regular public high school. And I was so excited. My parents were destroyed that I had to go to a public high school. My sister resented me because I no longer had her spot grandfathered into the college prep high school. So, I, anyways, I went to the public high school. There was quite a bit of crime in the high school. It wasn't exactly a well-known one for good reasons. It was well-known for very bad reasons. The day that my mom came into my college prep school, she was putting in the transfer forms and the news was on. And she asked, "What school is that?" And they told her, and she started crying. It was because there had been a stabbing in the parking lot of the high school over $20 or something. And she just cried. Nothing ever happened to me while I was in the school. Nothing like that anyways. But there were definitely stories about things, and I don't know, it was a lot. But I went and I learned very quickly that the cliques were real, and it was nothing like the college prep school where you pretty much had two kinds of cliques and that was it. You had mega athletes that were really smart, or you had smart people that were really smart. But I went to this public high school and it was clock tower kids, goths, preppy, skateboard, country, I mean, you name it, they were all there. And I kind of mingled with not goth, but like punk, the clock tower kids. Like, I didn't actually ever really fit in anywhere. So at some point, I wasn't necessarily being bullied. I just more or less fell to the wayside where people more or less ignored me. I just wasn't there. And I was okay with it for the most part, because it just meant people stayed out of my business and stayed out of my way. I was still a goofball to anyone that was open to talking to me. I just liked being silly, and I loved art class, was my favorite. I ended up taking AP art, and I got some pieces of art into a couple art shows just at the local college, but it wasn't, a huge thing. So going through high school, I met a boy that I fell very hard for at the time, and he was older, and my parents immediately were against it, so I ran towards it more. And it was essentially my escape from my home life, from the dentist issues, and I leaned on him a lot. And the bullying would start to kind of ebb and flow. It would happen and then it wouldn't, and then it would happen and then it wouldn't. And then my junior year of high school, my mom unalived herself. And the way that I found out was I came home from school. I was walking home from the bus stop, and there were cop cars outside. And I walked past the cop cars. I went inside, and I expected to see my dad being arrested, my mom being talked to, maybe. I went inside, and my brother was staying with us. He had an infant at the time, My mom's mother and her stepdad were there, so my grandparents, and they were walking around with the baby. My little sister and my little brother weren't home yet. There was a lot of commotion happening, and to this day I don't fully know every single thing. I've heard bits and pieces, but eventually my little brother and my little sister did get home, but there was already so much drama. Something just wasn't right. The day before, well, that morning, it was that morning, my mom was saying goodbye. And I knew it was wrong the way she was saying it. And I grabbed her by her shoulders and I said, I'm not going to school, I'm staying here with you. And she said, you're going to go to school. What do? Do you tell your mom no? And my little sister went in after me, and I couldn't stop crying. And my mom sent me a text while I was at school. I don't remember what it said though, but it was a timed text. So she had typed it and she had it set for a timer to be sent when she was ready for it to be sent. And I kind of get it now, I guess, but my mom was involved in something with her job, something about money. She worked for psychologists, so allegedly there were prescriptions involved. Again, to this day, I don't fully understand or know, but she was in jail for, I think, 2 days. Sorry, I completely told the story backwards. She was in jail. She said goodbye. That day I came home, and there were cop cars, and I was just in denial. I didn't think it had anything to do with my mom. And then somebody kept asking me where my mom was. It could have been a cop. It could have been my grandparents. I don't remember. My older brother was arguing with my grandparents, and he was telling me that he couldn't get a hold of my mom, our mom. And I just remember being almost like a zombie the whole way. And eventually I went up to my room, started acting like nothing was wrong, even though there were cops all over our house, tearing apart my parents' room. I could hear them in the bathroom. It was right next to my bedroom. And nobody really said a whole lot to me until they called me downstairs, and all of us kids were in the living room. My grandparents had been called to a cop car, and then they came back inside, and they said they found my mom. I'm pretty sure they said they found my mom's body. And I went upstairs and I just started screaming and freaking out. A cop came up and he sat in my doorway the whole time. I was just screaming, and pretty sure I threw my stereo system or something, and he didn't even bat an eye. He just sat in my doorway. He did not come into my room. He just sat there. And by the time I was done, I don't know where I was going or what I was about to do, but I basically more or less crashed into him, and I just sobbed and screamed. You would think that after that, the issues with my dad would maybe get better, that he would learn his lesson, that he couldn't keep treating anybody the way he had been. Well, it got worse. He expected me to almost assume like the motherly role. And at the same time, now he picked up drinking and flirting with women in front of us. Like our military friends, his military friends had pools and stuff, so we would go to their houses for like pool parties, and things got pretty inappropriate very quickly. And the whole time I just still hadn't wrapped my head around anything. And eventually, he told me he was seeing someone, our neighbor's sister. And I was like, okay. And in the meantime, he was being told and fed information from my counselor about my mom's passing. And he would use that against me outside of the counseling sessions. He would say, well, guess what she told me now? And finding out that my counselor was telling him everything, I stopped talking to her. So I stopped doing counseling, which didn't help. And I developed some pretty strong trust issues from there. And I think it was the day after I turned 18, I left in the middle of the night. I left him a note and moved in with my boyfriend. And since I did that, I moved with him and his family to another state, and we got married. Things went south pretty quickly. We had been together a handful of years. Things went south, though, because my skin, my dental stuff, matter of fact, all of that was like done. All my crowns were done after my mom's passing, so that was really hard for me. But my crown started falling apart. I was severely depressed. Excuse me. I was severely depressed. To put it in perspective, he physically held me back from climbing into my mom's casket, and I was a wreck. Pretty massive wreck. And later on, come to find out, he was cheating on me numerous times with numerous different girls. And when I asked him why he did it, he said it was because I had changed, and yeah. So as soon as he said that, I told him I wanted a divorce, and I got my divorce. At that point, I was working at a fitness facility for the first time. I was living with 3 or 4 roommates, and I was living life, just doing my own thing, thinking for myself, being by myself. And then I met my son's father. And that was 3 years of abuse that I still can't fully wrap my head around. There was alcohol, cheating, a lot of different things. And I had our son, and I thought it would make things better, but it made it worse. I had to find out the hard way that in his past with having children, because he had already had children before meeting me, something in him would just snap. And I can't say for certain if it was the pressure of having a child to care for, or if it was the jealousy of, the mom being solely invested in the newborn baby once it was born, or if it was the limits of like, you got to be at home with your baby. You have to take care of your baby. You have to buy food for it. You have to take it to doctor appointments. But he just snapped. And everything that I had experienced was tenfold. Just very, very bad. And I finally started to find a way out and away from him. Finally started establishing some good boundaries as far as like him seeing our son or whatever. And he was arrested for violence. Not with me, because everything that happened with me, I had no proof. I was very afraid of cops, which was very ironic. But I just didn't have it in me to say or do anything about it to get him reported or hold him accountable. And the job I am currently at actually helped me put into perspective the way he had been treating me and realizing that how he was treating me was actually not normal. But regardless, he was arrested and arrested again. And somewhere along the way, in between, I had just gotten very sad. And the whole way through all these years, my crowns were falling apart, breaking. I had spit my crowns out a few times and had no hope of finding them. And just by the grace of God, I was able to find them, and I would, put them back in my mouth. I finally got all my teeth removed, and I've told that story a few times. Got my dentures, and as I was healing, I started to really firmly grasp my newfound confidence. And it wasn't for my face being swollen or whatever. It was just the fact that I had teeth that were no longer being spit out. I could talk better, I could laugh, I could smile and not hold back. So I went on a dating app. I didn't expect anything to come of it. I didn't expect anything, really. I had heard things about dating apps, especially certain ones, and I was like, okay, well, then I'll keep my expectations low and go from there. And a few people did message me, but no one seemed special. The way I saw it, not special enough to go out of my way to make arrangements to meet or give them my phone number. Just messaging, and eventually I think they got bored and they would just kind of leave me alone, or I would ghost them, depending. And then I saw Matt, and supposedly he super liked me, and it said like you matched on the bottom of the screen, and there were like fireworks. And something inside me knew something was already special, even before he said anything. But he did send me a message. We messaged a few times. And I knew he was special. Something about him just really did stick out. Something I do believe he and I are twin flames. I think my soul saw his and recognized him and said, "Where have you been?" And I had to drive out his way anyways to figure out a car situation I had going on at the time. So I said, you know what? How about we grab coffee? So we met and grabbed coffee, asked each other some questions, but we had already been messaging each other, so there wasn't a whole lot to really ask. At that point, we were also doing Zoom dates, so it was just a matter of seeing each other at that point. And we kissed on the first date. I just knew. I knew he was the one. And I just wish I would have found him sooner. But the way I always word it to him is I had to have our son first before I met him because I needed my son to save my life. There were a few times where I didn't think I needed to be here anymore. And one of those times, my phone had fallen out of my pocket, and my son's ultrasound came up on the screen. And I knew he had to be here, and I knew I needed him just as much, if not more, than he needed me. And I needed him. And I needed him to make me grow up. I needed him to give me something to stand for, because if nothing else, I don't always believe in myself. I'm not always willing to take care of myself, but I will take care of my son's mother. And I will make sure she gets what needs to be done. And from there, I've grown into someone who Matt ended up eventually falling in love with. If he had met me beforehand, I'm convinced he wouldn't have been in love. I certainly wasn't. I did not care for who I was back then. I love and I respect who I am today. But back then, absolutely not. So, to this day, I have no relationship with my immediate family. I tried a few times going back to, make things work. And my little sister and my older brother are estranged from me. I prefer not to ever talk to my older brother again because he did abuse me. My sister, I tried, and she didn't seem to really care for it. But my dad, he did move on, and he married that neighbor's sister. He apologized for how he was, but he did not change. When I was pregnant, he told me how he thinks I was going to end up, that I would lose my son and some other things. And when I looked him square in his face and I said, "Are you sure that is what you want to say to me?" He didn't say a word. He just stared me down. So I said, "Okay." That was all I needed. And I hadn't looked back since. Don't get me wrong. I do wonder from time to time if he regrets anything, but a good part of me already knows the answer, because at one point he had my phone number, and if me or his grandson mattered, he certainly could have called and asked if we were okay, if we were even alive, which he never did. So that was that answer for me. I hope one day my little brother will maybe find me. But I hope he's doing well. I have no ill will towards anyone in my family. I just wish that with all of the pain and suffering that was in that home, I wish it could have had a happier ending. But I can't make anyone be what they're not. And for me, it turned into a matter of knowing that nothing could stand between me and my boy. And when it came down to it with my health, I made those decisions to get my teeth pulled and to get my dentures. I did that for myself. And getting out of an abusive relationships, I survived those. And for that, I think I'm pretty strong. And then to be able to live a life in front of my son where no matter how hard and cold life got, I refuse to let it make me cold and hard. I definitely have a stronger sense about myself, a zero nonsense, very little patience for nonsense, but I'm still the same soft person I was before, in the sense that if someone cries in front of me, I will most likely cry. Some of the comments that are here in this support group bring me to tears, and you guys have seen it. But for me to come from where I come from, and for me to be who I am, that's what I want my son to learn and know. And that's who Matt fell in love with. So I gotta go. But if you guys have any other questions, if you guys have comments about this video, obviously drop it in the comments. If you like videos like this one, go ahead and give it a thumbs up so that I maybe make more like this one in the future. And if you'd like to see more from me in the future, go ahead and subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.